Blinken says China rejects status quo of Taiwan situation. South Korea warns of unparalleled response if North Korea holds nuclear test. Cost of having fun in Singapore surges to highest in 40 years. Putin scrambles to boost weapon production. Ethiopia peace talk on Tigray conflict have begun. US authorities departure of non-emergency staff from Nigeria. Japan pushes public to buy into digital IDs. Warming hole in North Atlantic not a sign of apocalyptic event.
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. It's Thursday, October 27th, and here are your top stories. Speaking at an event organized by Bloomberg, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Wednesday that China has fundamentally changed a decades-old basic understanding between Washington and Beijing that its differences with Taiwan would be managed peacefully. China has decided the status quo of Taiwan's situation is no longer acceptable. China has also made decision on exerting more pressure on Taiwan and holding out the possibility of using force to achieve their goals if pressure tactics do not work.
We oppose any unilateral efforts to change the status quo, especially by force.
Blinken said, "What's changed is this. The decision by the government in Beijing that status quo was no longer acceptable, that they wanted to speed up the process by which they would pursue reunification." He added, Washington did not want a Cold War and was not trying to restrain China, but was resolute and standing up for its interests. China's leader Xi Jinping told the 5-yearly Congress of China's ruling Communist Party last week that Beijing would never renounce the right to use force over Taiwan.
South Korea said on Wednesday that it had agreed with the United States and Japan that a resumption of nuclear testing by North Korea would have to be met with an unparalleled response. After discussing the issue with Japanese Vice Foreign Minister Takeo Mori and U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman in Tokyo Wednesday, South Korean First Vice Foreign Minister Cho Yong-dong told a joint news conference, "We agreed that an unparalleled scale of response would be necessary if North Korea pushes ahead with a 7th nuclear test."
Senior diplomats from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo once again agreed on the need for a response on an unprecedented scale.
Reuters said that the United States and its allies have offered few details on what new measures they might take in response to a resumption of nuclear testing, which U.S. State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel reiterated on Wednesday would be a grave escalatory action that would seriously threaten regional stability. North Korea's last nuclear test concerned China and Russia to the extent that they backed toughened United Nations Security Council sanctions, but it is unclear if they would do so again.
According to Singapore's Department of Statistics on Tuesday, prices of recreational and cultural activities in Singapore in September soared to their highest level in 40 years, while holiday expenses rose by 8.4%, keeping that pet puppy or turtle now costs 5.2% more than a year earlier. Households in Singapore are also spending more on necessities and accommodation, while it's getting costlier to have fun and relax. Dining out at hawker centers, which serve local street food such as chicken rice, is 7.9% pricier.
It says its rents have increased by 30% across the board since the start of the year.
According to media reports, food staple in Singapore like flour and noodles also saw all-time highs. Chilled poultry prices jumped by a record 39% before a chicken export ban was lifted this month by neighboring Malaysia. Singapore unveiled a 1.5 billion Singaporean dollars or 1.05 billion inflation relief package earlier this month. FUNDAY News reported on October 17th that 2.5 million eligible Singaporean adults will receive up to 500 Singaporean dollars to help middle and low-income people offset higher costs of living.
Russian President Vladimir Putin urged his government on Tuesday to cut through bureaucracy to crank out enough weapons and supplies to fuel the war in Ukraine. The Russian military shortfall in the 8-month war have been so pronounced that Putin had to create a structure to try to address them. On Tuesday, he chaired a new committee designed to accelerate the production and delivery of weapons and supplies for Russian troops, stressing the need to gain higher tempo in all areas.
Russian news reports have acknowledged that many of those called up under a mobilization of 300,000 reservists that Putin ordered haven't been provided with basic equipment, such as medical kits and flak jackets, and have had to find their own. Other reports have suggested that Russian troops are increasingly forced to use old and sometimes unreliable equipment, and that some of the newly mobilized troops are rushed to the war front with little training.
Do today learn. Today is Tuesday.
Commercial.
Traveler 是旅行者。
I have to wait for Clay.
So he or she is at the Columbia Towers Hotel gift store. 所以他在这个饭店的礼品店，然后他要买东西。Okay, so let's take this chance and listen to the.
学习让生活充满乐趣。FUNDAY 英语。
A South African government spokesman said on Tuesday that peace talks to end Ethiopia's devastating Tigray conflict have begun in South Africa. The spokesman said the African Union-led talks that started Tuesday are expected to continue until Sunday. Former Nigerian president and AU envoy Olusegun Obasanjo, former South African deputy president Famzile Malambo Nakuga, and former Kenyan president Uhuru Kenyatta are facilitating the talks with the encouragement of the United States.
Delegations from the Ethiopian government and Tigray authorities arrive in South Africa this week. U.S. Special Envoy Mike Hammer picked up the Tigray delegation in a U.S. military aircraft on Sunday. The war, since exploding in November 2020, has also spilled over into Ethiopia's neighboring Amhara and Afar regions, putting hundreds of thousands of people there in peril. Meanwhile, the economy of Ethiopia, once one of the fastest growing in Africa, has suffered. The U.S. has begun warning of a 500,000 casualty.
After the United States and the United Kingdom warned on Sunday of a possible terrorist attack in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, especially aimed at government buildings, places of worship, and schools, among other targets, the U.S. State Department on Tuesday authorized the departure of non-emergency U.S. government employees and their families from Nigeria due to a heightened risk of terrorist attacks in the country.
Is it on those states you want to run to or you want to go to Calabar?
The media reported Nigeria is fighting an Islamic insurgency mainly in the northeast. But in July, the Islamic State claimed responsibility for a raid on a prison in Abuja, which freed around 440 inmates, raising fear that insurgents were venturing from their enclaves. The U.S. Embassy in Nigeria said, there is an elevated risk of terror attacks in Nigeria, specifically Abuja, and added that shopping malls, law enforcement facilities, and international organizations were among the known at-risk places.
Japan has stepped up its push to catch up on digitalization by telling a reluctant public they have to sign up for digital IDs or possibly lose access to their public health insurance. Health insurance cards now in use, which lack photos, will be discontinued in late 2024. People will be required to use My Number cards instead. But the reluctance to go digital extends beyond the healthcare system. After numerous scandals over leaks and other mistakes, many Japanese distrust the government's handling of data.
Phone you can probably take pictures and send emails.
The media said that even though the system kicked off in 2016, it hasn't resonated with the public. Some bureaucratic procedures can be done online, but many Japanese offices still insist on people providing paper forms stamped with inkan, which are seals used for identification. On Monday, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida told lawmakers that the old health insurance cards will be phased out, but the government will arrange for people to continue to use their public health insurance if they are paying into a health plan.
While the Earth is getting warmer, the water is actually getting colder in a subpolar North Atlantic region called the warming hole. Some scientists predict that changing ocean temperatures like this could lead to sudden climate change events, like in the movie The Day After Tomorrow. However, a new study says that's not necessarily what we're seeing here. Researchers from the University of Miami report that the warming hole is not the result of a slowdown in ocean currents, as past scientists have suggested.
The North Atlantic, south of Greenland.
A postdoctoral researcher, Chen Fei-He, in the Department of Atmospheric Sciences at the Rosenstiel School said, our study shows the warming hole during the past century is unlikely due to a slowdown of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. Instead, the warming hole is actually a consequence of human-driven changes in the atmosphere. He also said, our findings suggest that this warming hole will not result in an abrupt climate change event lethal to humans as depicted in Hollywood movies.
FUNDAY News will help you sharpen your English skills and keep you informed about international current events. If you want to know more about our other programs and keep learning about the world's most important topics in English, please click the link in the description below to join FUNDAY for free. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I will see you next time.